converted man here. If you hear fans running in my background, that's because there are fans in my background because my AC is not working at the moment and it's hot here. Anyways, let's look at a video. Ah, yeah, the by the Book Ministries, which is just basically a Christian React video channel. It's just I'm gonna react to different things and then give a little miniature commentary on it. Only nitwits would react to things and then give a miniature commentary. I react to things and give a commentary that takes at least an hour to get through. Therefore, I'm not a nitwit. Anyways, let's see what nitwit has to react to this time. Something that C.S. Lewis brought up. Woohoo! What does Narnia boy have to say today? Oh no, he's also going to use Frank Turek. Woohoo! Frank fucking Turek.
Suppose there was no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, my brain was not designed for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of atoms in my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? I love.
All right, so this is essentially an appeal to consequence. Well, if we are X, then we can't trust things, right? If we're just the byproduct of blah, 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 then X is true. We don't want X to be true. Therefore, we're not just that. Yes, we are that, maybe. Although I think Lewis had problems with biological evolution. He didn't really believe or trust in it or something like that. I think that it was an issue he had. Um, and so, how can I trust my brain that wasn't designed for thinking? Well, how do you know that your brain was designed for thinking? If we go with the God of the Bible, the Judeo-Christian God that C.S. Lewis believes in, how do you know that your brain is designed for thinking? Where does it say that in your Bible? In fact, really, what is it that God wants from you ultimately? Ultimately, God wants your love and obedience and worship. So, your mind is not designed for thinking. Your mind is designed for obedience, worship, and love, but not necessarily thinking. That's not a guarantee. So, if the Judeo Christian God is true, how can you have a thinking brain when clearly your God designed it for other purposes? Oops. Now, the argument is just as bad no matter how you phrase it, but I just wanted to reductio ad absurdum C.S. Lewis' bad argument because his argument's flawed. It's nothing more than an appeal to consequence. Our brains are the result of biological evolution, and they are not designed. That as for they are uh, a byproduct of years and years and years of trial and error by nature to allow for survivability. So, the fact is that we do notice that many humans cannot, in fact, trust their brain because many humans do not behave in ways that show that their brain is operating the way that the majority of people operate. And so in the past, these people would have probably suffered and died of hunger, or thirst, or been killed by a predator or what have you, been abandoned by the tribe, left alone, cast out, etc. Whereas as you get more modern, those people might have been seen as witches or warlocks or evildoers or being possessed or whatever. And as you move forward through humanity, eventually we realize that mental impairment is a thing, that different brains work in different ways, and we start to help people with various different disabilities to be part of society. So the fact of the matter is, to some degree, none of us can fully trust our brain. Even if there's a God, that would still be true, because we recognize the fact that people's people's memory is not perfect. People do not um, always behave the way that they want to. That feelings can be invoked in various different chemical methods, can change your behavior. Different things can affect a person's personality. I just had watched one of these police body cam videos lately, where this woman was caught at a school. She was a teacher of a school, and they're like, "We saw that your whole personality has changed and you're acting very oddly, and we think that you might be drunk." And they bring in a police officer. He does a breathalyzer, and they're like, "Look, you're this is like you're past like normal. Are you?" Have you, how much have you had to drink? Oh, I didn't drink at all. Oh, well, I drank some last night. Oh, well, maybe I drank early this morning. I didn't drink at school though. Well, no, she had a cup of wine there at the school. She was drinking there, because you can't get to the sort of alcohol limit that she was at by just drinking one drink a while ago. Um, so she was an alcoholic and probably got fired. And good. She needs to get help for that. But she kept lying to the guy and all this, and don't give me another chance. But well, no, because her behavior was completely altered. But even in that altered state, she had certain uh, faculties that she used that would enable her to kind of talk her way out of being in trouble when she was drunk. Because even when you get angry, you still have some level of control over your actions. So, alcohol definitely influenced this woman's actions and thinking and behavior. And everyone could recognize that. And they recognized that she was a danger to herself, the students, etc. And recognized that she was behaving in a way that just was not appropriate to that location. And so they took her away and they took her to jail, because basically she just lied herself into police custody when she could have called for a ride home. She didn't want to do that. So, okay, so we know that drugs and chemicals can alter the brain state. We know that injury can also alter the brain state. We know that mental issues exist for people that of any age. It can happen. Dementia and Alzheimer's and amnesia, and all these things can happen. And your sensory inputs can fail you. Your eyesight, your hearing, your sense of smell, taste, touch, whatever. All these things can fail you, and we know that. So to some degree, we cannot fully 100% trust our mind, but we have really no choice. We have to kind of do it, and we do for the most part until somebody notices that, hey, something's going on and maybe you need some help, and they get us that help that we need, or we get it ourselves, or whatever. We try to make it so that our brain functions the way that it allows us to function in society. And even if there's a God, all of that is still true. You can't get out of the problem of not being able to fully trust your brain just by positing God. In fact, I think that the problem gets far worse, because especially with the Judeo-Christian God, you have ideas of evil spirits messing around that could interfere with your brain or possess you and make you do things. And you have good spirits that could help you, and all the, you have God itself that could mess with you in some way. So how could you possibly trust your brain then? Because you have all these spiritual agents out there doing spiritual warfare that you have absolutely no control over or saying. And you might think, well, I'm praying hard and I'm, suited in the armor of God, but one little temptation and they get in and you don't know. And how do you know that you're going to the right church anyways? And how do you know that you're worshiping the right God? And because all these spiritual warfare is going on. So how in the world could you know to trust your brain under those conditions where you have all these spiritual influences messing about with humanity? They could play tricks and look like people that and whatever. So your problem doesn't go away by positing God, especially if God comes with a supernatural realm of things that can affect and do affect humans, or supposedly do at any rate, or if that God itself could alter your mind. That certainly makes it that you can't know for sure that things are comparable or made trustworthy. It's like, oh no, of course you can trust God, but you don't know that either. You just know that somebody said that God was trustworthy. You don't know actually that God is trustworthy. That's a belief that you hold. But you could be holding that belief incorrectly because God could be a trickster for all you know. So none of this solves the problem of sophilism, hard sophilism. It's an unsolvable problem. We can't really trust our senses, our brain to some extent. What degree that is varies from person to person and time to time, and depends on what you eat or don't eat, or what drugs or injuries you might have, or what mental issues you might have inherited or obtained, or what have you. So the fact of the matter is, this argument isn't even an argument. Not just because of the appeal to consequence, but also for all those reasons that I mentioned.
That quote from C.S. Lewis because it reveals a very interesting conundrum that befalls the atheist. If there is no God, then our brains are merely the result of an unguided evolutionary process, which begs the question, by what standard do we trust our own thoughts? And that's the topic.
Okay, and as I already labored to explain, to some degree you might not be able to, but for the most part it appears that the majority of humans can in fact uh, trust their thoughts, and to some degree again, and we can then utilize our ability to track what's going on in reality, and of course that's the system of science, and all that. And the thing is, you wouldn't survive if your sensory input was so bad. And so our ancestors that I mentioned that didn't survive very long because of their brain problems, well, their genes weren't passed on. So we got the brains that were able to perceive reality more often than not. We still are saddled with some of the baggage. Don't get me wrong. We still have a lot of that baggage with us today, although some of that might be due to chemicals that we've introduced into our own food, or things we put into the atmosphere, or the microplastics in the ocean, or who knows what. But nonetheless, here we are, and by and large, evolution has selected, if you will, the ones who will survive based on the ability to perceive reality. Because those who can perceive reality survive the onslaught of the dangers of nature. And of course, in modern day society, that's not really a problem, for the most part. So now we have things that can help the people that don't have the, mental faculties that the majority of people do. So somebody, say, with Down syndrome or something like that, is enabled to participate with the rest of society by various different programs that we have, and drugs that we've developed, and methods that we have, and psychological methodology, and whatever treatments, and whatever things that we do that lets them participate in this great project of humanity that we have going on here. Now, not everywhere is like that. Sadly, there's places out there where somebody that has an issue like that is going to be discarded by society, and even in our society that happens. So, and it probably happens more often in third world countries than it does in first or second world countries. I'm not sure what the degree and rankings are per se, but it's like in the countries that aren't as well developed, or in the least of the area that is overlooked, what have you. Somebody somewhere is born and might fall through the cracks and might perish because their parents didn't have very good sensory inputs that allowed their brains to process reality very well. And so those genes will just die out with those people and won't get passed on. That's how that works. We have to be able to perceive reality to survive reality. Although modern society has made it that it's possible that people that would have otherwise perished in the past now can survive reality. But whether or not that person is able to reproduce or does reproduce is a different question in full. Some do, but some don't. So who knows what percentage of humanity is passing on its genes that are occurring that wouldn't occur due to natural selection now. But we don't know, and we allow that freedom of opportunity to flourish, because even somebody, two people get together that happen to have Down syndrome, they can have a kid that doesn't have that. So small people, midgets, they can have a kid that's not that. So the variety happens, and autistic spectrum, and then of course the what's called the idiot savant. Although we might want to rethink that terminology, I don't know, but you have the people that are super talented in one thing, and so maybe that will unlock, and we'll all have super abilities in every aspect. That'd be great, but without the limitations. Wouldn't that be awesome? And maybe we'll get to some point where we can fiddle with the genes and make it that we're all born with all the abilities that we could ever possibly want, and then some. Wouldn't that be great? But all of that, your response to the way that humanity is, it's like, well, but you can't really trust it if we're just evolved. No, of course we can, because our ancestors survived the outdoors and hunting and gathering for millions of years before we modernized. And even when we did modernize and have agriculture, we still had to survive a whole bunch of stuff. And even today, we still have to survive a bunch of stuff. And so none of that is enhanced in any way, shape, or form when you add God to the picture.
Topic of today's video. In this video, Frank Turek debates an atheist on the purpose of reason and if reason actually...
Okay, so he's lying right now. It isn't a debate. It's a question and answer segment. a debate suggests something else. So just want to point out the guy's lying, but he does that all the time, so it's fine.
Exists in an atheistic universe. And although this atheist tried to defend his position that you don't need a God, he was humbly dismantled by Frank Turek's argument. I want you to watch this video, and I'm going to give my thoughts as we go.
Why couldn't we trust their minds if they're just made of matter?
Well, because if physics drive everything and there's no immaterial realm, if we're mind, then how can physics drive conclusions that are true?
So, Frank, instead of answering the question that was asked of him, instead asks a question that is different from the question that was asked him. This is a very, very typical apologetic method used. That rather than answering your question directly, I'm gonna instead ask a question. And politicians do something similar where the reporter will ask a question and they'll give an answer to a different question that they want to answer. They'll say something that has nothing to do with that. And they'll just pretend like you asked the question. Oh, you mean this thing that I want to talk about? And so that's what Frank did here. Instead of saying, why couldn't it just be this way? Well, because, well, let me ask you this. No. How about you explain the answer first and then ask your question? No, we're not going to do that. So, well, if it's just physics and, then physics can't do this. Well, how do you know that, Frank? Are you a physicist? No. Okay. So how do you know that it can't get to the truth? How do you know that proposition is true? What indicates that? All you're doing is appealing to your own personal ignorance on the issue or personal incredulity. You don't know. Well, how does it work? I don't know. How did it do it? I don't know. How do we trust it? I don't know. Let's go back a little bit because it's just great.
Can physics drive conclusions that are true?
How can physics drive conclusions that are true? That's not the question, because the question was about the brain. The brain, apparently, in this question, the brain is formed as a result of physics. I wouldn't have put it that way, because the brain is formed as a result of biology. And, well, biology is constrained by physics, but so is everything else. So, but we don't, but I would frame it in the proper, I would try to frame it in the proper realm, that biology is what drives the brain formation primarily. And, well, physics, yes, applies to everything. But okay. Well, how does that work? That's what Frank is asking. But he's not even asking that. He said, how does physics get to a conclusion that's true? That's a different question than how does physics make the brain get the conclusion that's true? So you're getting rid of the whole brain part, which is central to the question that the person is posing. And you're ignoring that whole bit in order to recontextualize the question so that you can ask a loaded question that is completely a red herring to the topic at hand, where it appears to be, of course, similar enough to the topic. But let's hear what Turek has to say, I guess.
They might drive conclusions that lead to survival, but not true.
So that's kind of stupid, isn't it? I mean, it might lead to survival, but not true. What do you mean by that? What? If you survive, wouldn't that require you to be able to survive something that was perceived as a danger? Now, occasionally, that means you're going to run away from things that aren't actual dangers. Although sometimes you won't and you'll investigate. But nonetheless, you'll be cautious to some degree, right? But note also how, of course, none of this is really answering the question. Why can't the physical process get to the truth? The truth is that survivability requires you to be able to perceive reality, which is what the truth is. But, of course, if he said any of that, well, then he'd not be Frank Turek anymore. Because
Like right now, we're having a conversation, right?
Yes.
What physical laws are creating your response to me and my response to you?
What physical laws are creating my response to you and your response to me is another question that is completely and wholly irrelevant from his question. So rather than answer the question, Frank is dodging and asking questions instead. Okay, yeah, great. How about Frank? Answer the question I asked. How about that? Why can't it be that this is the way things work? Why is it that you reject that? Explain that without asking me questions. Can you do that, Frank? I would love to ask him. I'd say, Frank, without asking me any questions, could you just answer my question in a straightforward manner? Here's my question, Frank. Where is the empirical evidence repeatable test for God? You know, of course he won't answer that. He'll go off on his little song and dance or whatever. But at any rate, okay, back to the video.
I guess all of the atoms and particles and all the laws of nature just wrapped up together in a ultra complex way.
Well, yeah, but how do they come up with these unique questions? We're having a conversation here. Are we saying that different chemicals come into existence when I say pink elephant?
Okay, so what Frank is doing here is first. You asked a question that a lay person wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to answer on the spot. And I love the editing here. Isn't this great? Let's just make fun of this young man. Was he 20-ish, something like that. Let's make fun of that. He's
Atoms and particles.
Let's just zoom into the hands there. Look, he's doing a funny thing with his hands. Zoom into that. Let's make fun of him. You fucking assholes. Jeez, it's so obvious. It's so obvious what you're doing here, guys. Come on.
And all the laws of nature just wrapped up together in a ultra complex.
Yeah, the question that Frank asked is not one that you could really answer. How is it that physics allows for us to have this conversation? Well, Frank, I don't know. Let's see. Well, sound is a thing because there's particles in the air. How long do you have, Frank? Because it's gonna take a while to explain everything to you because you're so stupid that you don't know the answer to this question. How is it that we're having a conversation? Well, we have these things called vocal cords, you see. How much information do you need, Frank? But what this is doing is, Frank, I don't know the answer. I don't know. I'm not playing your stupid game. I don't know. That doesn't answer my question. You're asking me all these. I don't know the answer. Now, you tell me why it can't get to the truth. That's the problem. You're not doing that, Frank.
It's way.
Well, yeah, but how do they come up with these unique questions? We're having a conversation here. Are we saying that different chemicals come into existence when I say pink elephant? And different chemicals come up in your mind when you say white rhinoceros.
Well, Frank, that might be, I know we're not saying that, but that might be indeed what's happening. And whether or not you like that or understand it or comprehend it, it's completely irrelevant. Okay, we don't understand at best, let's say, for the sake of being as stupid as you are, Frank, that we don't know how it is that we communicate things. Okay, great, fine. We don't know. All right, let's go with that. All right. Why is it that the physical world as we understand it can't get us to the truth? Why would that be, Frank? Well, can you explain how it works? No, Frank, I can't explain how it works. You can't explain how it works. Your God cannot explain how it works. Because, Frank, how did God make my brain work? How does God resolve that problem? Ultimately, what do you think enables God to enable our brain to get to truth? Ah, well, God's power. What's God's power? What is that? Where does that come from? How does that work? Well, God's power comes from God. Okay, but where's God getting that power from? Itself. How does it generate the power? What does it consume to have that power? It just has it. Okay? So that sounds a lot like magic to me. And you haven't really actually explained anything. This God just gave us the ability to think. And so you can't explain how we can think. And neither can I, at the best, if we're put into this situation. Neither one of us can explain how we can think. Okay, great. So your explanation of God doesn't get us anywhere closer to figuring out how we can think about anything in the first place. And perhaps my idea that the physical world allows for us to think might not explain, or at least I don't know how to explain things either. Okay, so none of that has anything to do with the question of why couldn't the physical world allow for the facts or the truth to be made evident to creatures such as we? That was the question, not what do we know about how our minds work, which neither of us might know the answer to, with or without a God, Frank. But you're off in a giant red herring rather than address the question at hand.
Yeah.
And that would be more of a miracle than saying we just have minds.
Would it?
Yeah.
Because it's like I guess think of like a computer.
Uh-huh.
Like we have like the screen of our eyes basically, but like you can't just like break open a computer and see, oh look, there's the pink elephant that's stored in there.
That's
But
right.
You can go onto the computer, type pink elephant, and there's the pink elephant.
Right, but this computer's designed, and that's why we can trust it.
The computer's designed, that's why we can trust it. No, we can't always trust the computer, though, can we? Because it can break down. So something being designed doesn't mean that you can trust it. So even if we think that our brain is designed, that doesn't mean we can trust it. And it doesn't answer the question, which is, of course, Frank's whole shtick. He's not answering the question at all. Not addressing it, not even a little.
If a computer was not designed, would you trust it?
I mean, I guess I'm having a hard time thinking of what that would even look like.
That's right. That's my point. That's Lewis's point.
Wow, you guys are moronic. So we're back to the watchmaker argument, basically. That's what this has gone back to, is, because you're so far off track. Like, what are you talking about? Computer that's not designed. What are you even talking about anymore at this point? Because he's trying to answer your question on the spot, And he's not there to answer questions. You're there to answer questions, Frank. All you can do is be dishonest and ask questions instead.
Yeah.
Why we can trust our minds? We know that. That's the
Well, Frank, you're wrong. Like I said earlier, we can't fully trust our minds. Not to 100%. I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe it fluctuates day to day, time to time. If you didn't get enough sleep, certainly you can't. Stay up late at night. Keep staying up. Don't actually do this at home, but stay. If you stay awake long enough, eventually you start getting pretty darn stupid, and you realize real quick you can't trust your brain. Do a math problem while you're wide awake and full of energy, and you've just eaten recently and all that, and then do math problems while you're drunk and see how well you do. Do math problems when you have lack of sleep and see how well you do. Guess what? We've done those tests. We know that cognitive faculties drop under those conditions. And actually, you get worse when you're tired than when you're drunk to some degree. So don't drive sleepy. Don't drive drunk, but definitely don't drive sleepy, because you'll do worse more than likely. But nonetheless, you can't always trust your brain. When so you're just wrong, Frank.
the effect. The question is, what caused that?
I guess
What caused that? What do you mean what caused it? Evolution caused it.
evolution.
But even if evolution were true, what laws?
Even if evolution were true. See, that's where I wish that Frank would just explode. Like if there was a law in the universe that would just make it when someone says something like that they would just spontaneously explode. That would be great. If evolution was true, and then we wouldn't have to deal with that. But nonetheless, in my imaginary world where that would function, people like Frank Turek wouldn't exist. But then I wouldn't be able to make a video complaining about it. So I guess I'd have to complain about other things. That'd be fine. Anyway,
That are driving evolution, where do they come from?
the things that are driving evolution, where do they come from? Nature.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's what Lewis is saying here. That when you get back to it, if the thoughts that you have are merely the byproducts of some atoms within my skull, then you should have no reason to trust those thoughts. But you can trust your thoughts.
But you really can't, not 100%. So Lewis was wrong, and Frank, you're wrong. Evolution did produce our brains, whether you like it or not. And adding God to that doesn't help you at all, not even a little.
So you ought not reason back to an undesigned mind. You ought to reason back to a designed mind.
Which is not rational to do so, given the fact that we have ample evidence that our brains are not designed at all, not even a little. So let's hear what React Guy has to say about this.
I love how this moment happened. It happened organically. This kid genuinely thought what he said made sense, not even realizing he's presupposing design to make sense of what he said.
No, you're presupposing design. He's asking the question, why can't the physical produce truth? Why can't physics produce truth? Which is badly phrased, but so you're not even responding to his question either. Did you even listen to the kid? I mean, my word, go back and listen to the question. Let's do that. Let's just do that.
Well, because
is on the purpose of reason. God, I want you to watch
matter.
and get my thoughts as we go.
Why couldn't we trust their minds if they're just made of matter?
Why couldn't we trust the minds if they're just made of matter? That's what he asked. Why couldn't we? That doesn't pre-assume anything at all. The question, the question, no.
So what?
But what caused it? DNA.
All right, so yeah, okay. Where was I? Let's see. Go back.
Mind is
What caused the universe to no one?
effect. So what caused your mind is the question.
And this is the question no one
Hold on.
Science up here, and they
hiding.
Hold
Or
on.
you're using your sense.
I lost my place. I apologize. Hold on a minute. Just hold on. Where was I? Where was I? Where the bleep was I? Right here. I think. Okay.
It happened. It happened organically. He's presupposing design to
there it
make
is.
sense of what he said.
No, he is not. No, he is not. That's my comment. Screw it.
If our minds are truly the result of evolutionary processes,
They
just
are.
atoms. Our thoughts are just atoms colliding.
They are.
And by what standard do we trust our thoughts?
Well, we don't really have a choice but to do it, and we shouldn't to a full degree. That's why you should be a skeptic, not a believer. You can't trust your thoughts fully. That's why you should be a skeptic rather than just, believe, oh, yeah, this book? Yeah, sure. That's written by God. Let me show you just an example of the stupidity that happens here. I love God and proud of it. Don't you mean you love God and I'm proud of it? I love God and proud of it is not very good of grammar there, person. Yeah, you're not perceiving reality very well. Anyways, sorry, just had to rant about that a little bit. All right, where was I? Oh yeah, complaining about this. Let's go.
I mean, listen, we trust our cell phones to function properly because we know they were designed. I trust.
Well, but if your cell phone occasionally would have memory problems, and after a certain age would stop functioning completely, and sometimes you would buy a phone and randomly it would come with a screen that didn't work. But would you continue? Would you think that the maker of that phone was a very good maker? If there was a producer of phones, a designer of phones, let's call the company God Phone, G Phone. There you go, G Phone, the new G Phone from God. And sometimes the G Phone, much like the G Spot, can't be found. But nonetheless, I had to do. Yeah, the G Phone, when you buy it, sometimes when you buy it, you won't even get the phone. It will arrive, the package will arrive, you'll open it, and there will be nothing there, but you'll see a note, we're sorry, but your phone died when we made it, so we're giving you what's left. And it's just some parts of the phone that you have to bury. Sorry. Sometimes when you buy the phone from G Phone, the screen doesn't work. Sometimes when you buy the G Phone, the buttons fall off and don't work. Sometimes the sound doesn't come out clearly. Sometimes it works pretty darn well for a while until it stops working. Sometimes it loses its memory. Sometimes it doesn't give you correct information when you look up a map. Sometimes it has weird beliefs that you can't explain. Sometimes would you continue buying the G Phone if every time you bought a G Phone the product was widely different and you couldn't rely that the product would work the same way every time. Would that be a good designer? Yes or no? Would the designer of the G phone be a good designer if every time that you purchased the G phone, it was slightly not to standard? Maybe the majority of time it worked fine for a few years, but you had to feed the phone. You had to take care of the phone. The phone was not self-sustaining. If you didn't plug it in and it goes to zero charge, it's dead. You need a new phone completely. Would you buy the G phone? Would you think that the manufacturers of the G phone were good manufacturers? Yes or no? If no, then at best what you have for God is a really shitty designer. Okay, your God's a crappy designer. If that's what you're going for, great. Pretty sure that's not the conclusion you want us to draw, but it would be the conclusion that we would have to draw if we didn't ignore all the fallacies that your argument clearly has. Mostly appeals to ignorance and personal incredulity, and of course, the lack of scientific understanding that you're bringing to the table.
This camera to function properly because I know it was designed. Therefore, I reason back to a designer. It's intellectually dishonest to therefore look at the human body, a cell, which is way more complex than a camera, and not reason back to a designer.
No, it's intellectually dishonest to look at the cell and reason anything without understanding anything at all. If you look at a cell and you go, okay, it's complex, that's interesting. And then you ask, well, how did it get to be that way? And you start doing study on the matter, what you find out is the damn thing evolved. That's what you find out. That's the truth. Whether there's a God or not, that's still the truth. If there's a God, it used evolution. But in doing so, it produced things that were extremely complicated, overly complex. The cell is not designed because design is simple. You don't add things to a computer that you just don't need. Your computer doesn't come with a blender attached. I mean, it could, but then that's another thing that could break down. And why would you want food near your computer? A juice maker on top of your computer. Probably not a good idea because water and electronics don't play well. And liquid, all the juice spills. Oh, no. Will it blend? And will it shut down my PC? And by the way, it runs off the same battery power. And it's USB plug into it. And, the thing is that your analogies run into all sorts of problems. The cell is complicated when it could be simple. And the simpler it is, the more efficient it would be. But it's not efficient. It's overly complex. And that's not design at all. And that it appears designed to you is just showing your ignorance of science. And so it is illogical to not explore biology and biological evolution to understand how the cell came about, and to just look at it and go, well, looks designed. That's not logical at all. That's not reasonable at all. That's not rational because reality tells us different. But you're a apologist. You don't care about reality, I guess.
What so many atheists fail to understand is when they say things like, we don't have enough evidence for God, or we don't need God to have science, morality, logic. When they say things like that, they're using their brain that they believe is a result of random processes. Why are you even trusting those thoughts to be true? Like, what's
All right, so this is essentially presuppositionalism at this point. It's like, well, if you can't, if there's a God, you can trust your brain to be true, and if not, then you can't trust your brain to produce truth. So therefore, there must be a God, because otherwise you couldn't say anything that was true. No, that's not how that works. That's not how it works at all. You don't understand science, so I mean that should just be. I mean, it's clear. It's clear you don't understand any science of biology or all. That's my conclusion is he doesn't understand it or care about it or whatever. But he's an apologist, so whatever.
standard are they true? Can't say yourself. That would make truth subjective and to
No, it's based on the fact of reality and that we can observe it. We write down things about it. We've studied these things.
say all truth is subjective is an absolute truth. So truth is not subjective. You can't say, well, I know that to be true because nature, reality. Well, you're using your senses to assess reality to make sure it's functioning properly.
And so are you. We are both using our senses to assess reality. We are trapped in the same reality. Adding God doesn't change anything.
Well, how do you know your senses are functioning properly?
Well, at some level, as I've said, we kind of don't. We have to rely on other people to tell us if our senses are functioning properly. Ever take an eye test or a hearing test? Yeah.
reality is telling me they're functioning properly. It's circular reasoning. So you can't trust reality or your senses without.
No, that's not circular reasoning. Not even a little. You don't know what circular reasoning is. So, circular reasoning is starting with the conclusion that you've come to. So, well, I mean, how is it that my mind functions? I don't know. Maybe so. I explore that question honestly and find out that, well, it's a complicated question, but ultimately I can't answer everything, but I can answer that the brain is a result of biological evolution, as is my body and the rest of humanity. Okay, cool. Then you come along and go, but if that's true, you can't trust your brain. And I go, well, yeah, it seems that we can't always trust our brain. And so now what? So you're wrong about your conclusion because you're arguing against reality. Well, but you can't trust your brain. No, we can't. Not fully, but you clearly think that we can. So how does it that God enables you magically to always trust your brain? It doesn't.
Without circular reasoning, can't trust your mind because it's a result of atoms colliding. How do you know anything you're saying is true?
How do you, because logic and reason dictates a lot of what I'm saying to be true. How do you know 1 + 1 is 2? Huh? And all these stupid memes that you include, whatever. And then back to the thing. I can't. Why? No, I'm already almost at an hour of this nonsense. Okay, so there's nothing more to see here. I don't think. I think we're done for now. Somebody somewhere will want me to do more, perhaps, on this. But I'm kind of done. I remember somebody said, a while back they wanted me to do more on some other video. And I didn't do it. I said, hey, yeah, tell me if you want it done. But only one person said to do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's not enough. I need, I don't know, 3 people to tell me to do more of the video. Then I'll do it. Yeah, that's it. All right. Be sure to be skeptical of things that are presented with such bad arguments as in this video that I have covered today. Frank Turek is not somebody that is skilled at much of anything other than dodging questions. So perhaps he'd be good at dodgeball. But he doesn't have a valid and sound argument. He didn't answer the question, and the apologist seems to be stuck in a land of presuppositionalism. And we shouldn't use precept because that is circular reasoning. How does God's brain function? How does God trust that God can think? Who gave God the ability to think? Well, no one did. God just thinks without any need of anything other than God to be able to do so. Well, then why can't we do the same? Well, we're not God. How do you know that? What if we are God? What is God? Stop dodging the questions and interact with the questions. But if you did that, you wouldn't be an apologist. If you assess the truth, you wouldn't be an apologist anymore. So I hope that you, if you're listening to this, will assess the argument for logical fallacies. And if you don't know how to do that, then learn informal logic and perhaps a little bit of formal logic along with that. And if you need help doing so, let me know. I'll be happy to help you as much as I can. Unless and until we have a valid and sound argument, we should be skeptical of the conclusions.